A mosaic lies beneath fading light. Its stone surface is worn by centuries of footsteps, its colors softened by time. At the center sits a robed figure, legs crossed in meditation, one hand reaching toward darkness, the other toward light. Around it, the sea crashes against ancient cliffs. Wind moves across lonely islands at the edge of the galaxy. No crowds gather here, no senators debate here, no armies march here. Yet this forgotten image may hold the oldest surviving clue to a mystery that shaped thousands of years of galactic history. As you settle in tonight and let the day drift farther away, we're tracing the complete history of the Jedi Order from its earliest known beginnings to its devastating fall. This is a calm journey through thousands of years of Star Wars lore, meant to carry you gently through the story while sleep slowly finds you. If you've traveled these lore roads before, quietly note which night you're joining us on. If you're new here, consider this night one. For now, all that matters is the sound of distant waves, the pull of ancient history, and a question that has never been fully answered. Why does the oldest known Jedi symbol not depict victory over darkness, but balance with it? Long before the Clone Wars, before the Republic, before Coruscant became the heart of civilization, the Force already flowed through the galaxy. Every era of Star Wars returns to this truth. Obi-Wan Kenobi described it as an energy field created by all living things. Yoda spoke of luminous beings connected through it. The Jedi spent millennia studying it. The Sith spent millennia seeking to dominate it. Yet neither group created it. The Force existed before every government, every temple, every warship, and every prophecy. It was ancient when the first hyperspace routes were mapped. Ancient when the first civilizations rose among the stars, and ancient when the earliest Force-sensitive beings began asking what connection they shared with the mysterious current running through all life. Canon intentionally leaves much of this earliest age hidden behind shadows. Modern Star Wars stories provide fragments rather than complete records. One of the most important fragments appears on the world of Achto, first seen in The Last Jedi. Located beyond the familiar regions of the galaxy, surrounded by stormy oceans and towering cliffs, Achto contains what Luke Skywalker identifies as the first Jedi temple. The island itself feels older than history. Stone structures stand against relentless winds. Narrow stairways climb toward ancient sanctuaries. And within those ruins survives the mosaic known as the Prime Jedi. Unlike the symbols familiar from the Republic era, this image shows harmony between opposing forces rather than separation from them. The image raises questions that historians inside the galaxy would likely debate for generations. During the Age of the Republic, Jedi teachings emphasized service, selflessness, discipline, and rejection of the dark side. Yet the Prime Jedi seems to portray equilibrium. Dark and light exist together within a single circle. The figure at the center does not appear to destroy darkness or imprison it. Instead, both aspects occupy the same design. Modern canon never provides a definitive explanation. The mystery remains deliberately unresolved. But the image survives as evidence that the earliest Jedi traditions may have understood balance differently than their descendants thousands of years later. As waves crash against Achto's cliffs, another mystery emerges. Who were the first Jedi? The answer is surprisingly difficult. In older legends continuity, Many stories attempted to explain the precise origins of the Order. Entire histories were written about the founding of Jedi civilization. Those stories remain fascinating, but they are no longer canon. Current canon is far more restrained. Lucasfilm has revealed ancient temples, sacred texts, and glimpses of forgotten eras, yet the exact names and dates of the first founders remain hidden. What survives instead is a sense of immense age. The Jedi Order is not merely old. By the time of the Skywalker saga, it is already thousands upon thousands of years old. The surviving sacred texts preserved on Ahch-To offer another clue. When Luke Skywalker arrives there after the destruction of his academy, he lives among relics connected to the earliest generations of Jedi. Later, Rey discovers the ancient books and secretly removes them before leaving the island. These texts become important because they preserve teachings that existed long before the final centuries of the Republic. The books are never fully translated for viewers. Their contents remain mostly unknown, yet their survival suggests something remarkable. Across wars, political collapses, invasions, and the rise and fall of entire governments, knowledge endured. Even when individual Jedi failed, the tradition itself found ways to survive. What transformed scattered Force mystics into a galaxy-spanning institution? That question sits at the center of the Order's hidden history. At some point, small communities of Force users evolved into something much larger. They developed training systems, they established traditions, they passed knowledge from teacher to student. They created symbols, rituals, and philosophies capable of surviving generations. The process likely unfolded across centuries rather than years. No single founder appears suddenly from the historical record. Instead, the Jedi seem to emerge gradually, like a river forming from countless streams flowing together until their combined current becomes impossible to ignore. The Force itself encouraged that growth. Across the galaxy, Force-sensitive individuals experienced visions, intuitions, and connections beyond ordinary understanding. Some learned to sense danger before it arrived. Others perceived emotions hidden beneath words. A few discovered extraordinary abilities that later generations would classify as Jedi powers. The temptation to use such gifts selfishly must have existed from the beginning. So did the temptation to dominate others. If early Jedi communities endured, they likely did so because they established rules strong enough to prevent power from becoming simple tyranny. That challenge would follow the Order throughout its entire history. Why did the Jedi eventually become tied so closely to government? The answer begins with the rise of the Galactic Republic. Long before Palpatine corrupted it, and long before clone troopers marched beneath its banners, the Republic represented one of the most ambitious political experiments in galactic history. Thousands of worlds joined together under shared institutions. Hyperlanes connected distant sectors, trade expanded, diplomacy replaced many local conflicts. Such a vast civilization needed mediators capable of operating beyond planetary loyalties. The Jedi were uniquely positioned to fill that role. Their reputation for discipline and service made them valuable partners. Over time, that partnership deepened. The Republic gained trusted guardians. The Jedi gained influence and resources. Eventually, Coruscant became the symbolic center of both institutions. The planet itself is astonishing. Entire ecosystems disappeared beneath layers of urban development. towers rose kilometers into the sky. Billions upon billions of citizens lived within a city that covered an entire world. At its heart stood the Jedi Temple, visible across the skyline, its 5 towers reaching upward like silent sentinels watching over the capital of the Republic. Yet another mystery waits beneath those towers. Why would the Jedi construct their greatest temple atop a dark side shrine? Canon confirms that the Jedi Temple on Coruscant was built over an ancient site connected to the dark side of the Force. The decision seems contradictory at first glance. Why place the headquarters of a light side order above such a location? One explanation appears in various canon reference materials. The Jedi believed the shrine could be contained and neutralized. Rather than abandoning the site, they transformed it. Their temple became both a symbol of victory and a permanent watchtower. For generations, Jedi masters lived, studied, and trained directly above a place linked to ancient darkness. The symbolism is striking. The Order's greatest center of learning rested on hidden foundations that many ordinary Jedi never even knew existed. Centuries later, when Darth Sidious rose to power and manipulated events from the shadows, some fans have wondered whether this buried darkness carried deeper significance. Canon does not support the idea that the shrine directly caused the fall of the Jedi. That remains theory rather than fact, yet the image remains difficult to ignore. Above, bright halls filled with younglings, scholars, and masters. Below, ancient darkness sealed beneath stone. The contrast feels almost prophetic. As the lights of Coruscant glitter beyond the temple windows and generations of Jedi pass through its halls, the Order seems stronger than ever. Ancient texts survive. The Republic expands. Students arrive from countless worlds. Few could imagine how long this era would last. Fewer still could imagine the enemy already taking shape beyond the edge of recorded history. Because even as the Jedi built temples, preserved knowledge, and devoted themselves to peace, another path through the Force was beginning to emerge, and before long, the greatest conflict in Jedi history would be born from within their own understanding of the Force itself. Why did the greatest enemy of the Jedi emerge from ideas that were, at least in the beginning, connected to their own search for knowledge? For much of galactic history, the Sith seem almost inseparable from the story of the Jedi. By the time of the Clone Wars, every Jedi youngling learned that the Sith were ancient enemies dedicated to domination through the dark side of the Force. Masters spoke of them in lessons. Archives preserved records of their wars. The very architecture of the Jedi Temple carried reminders of victories won against them. Yet the Sith did not arrive from another galaxy. They were not an alien invasion or a natural disaster. Their origins lay within the same broader exploration of the Force that eventually produced the Jedi Order itself. Somewhere in the distant past, Force users looked at the same mystery and reached radically different conclusions. Current canon deliberately leaves much of the earliest Jedi-Sith conflict unexplained. Unlike the old Legends continuity, which provided detailed histories of ancient Sith empires and specific founding events, canon offers fragments. Characters speak of ancient wars, Sith relics surface across different eras, ruins appear on forgotten worlds. The result feels appropriate. By the age of the Republic, those ancient conflicts were already separated from living memory by thousands of years. Even the Jedi archives preserved only incomplete records of the earliest centuries. History had become legend long before Luke Skywalker was born. One fact remains constant throughout every canon source. The dark side offered power through a fundamentally different relationship with the Force. Jedi teachings emphasized harmony, self-discipline, and service. Dark side practitioners sought control. Fear could become strength. Anger could become fuel. Hatred could become a weapon. These ideas possessed obvious dangers, but they also carried immediate rewards. A patient Jedi might spend decades mastering emotional balance. A dark side user could draw upon intense emotion in a single desperate moment and achieve dramatic results. The temptation was built into the very nature of sentient life. The conflict that followed would shape entire civilizations. Ancient Jedi and dark side followers fought across generations. Empires rose and collapsed. Knowledge was lost. Artifacts were buried. Some battles became so distant that only names survived. Yet the memory endured. Thousands of years later, when Darth Sidious revealed himself as a Sith Lord, the term still carried immense weight. Even after a millennium without openly operating Sith, the Jedi Council immediately understood the significance. The enemy they feared most had returned. As centuries passed, the Jedi Order survived those ancient struggles and entered an era that later generations would remember as a golden age. During the High Republic period, roughly beginning 500 years before the Battle of Yavin, the galaxy appeared stable in ways that would seem almost unimaginable to those living through the Clone Wars. The Republic expanded peacefully into frontier regions. New hyperspace routes opened access to distant sectors. Exploration flourished, trade increased. The Jedi were not fighting for survival, they were building. Why do so many later Jedi look back on the High Republic as an age of light? The answer begins with confidence. During this era, the Jedi believed deeply in their mission and in the Republic they served. Their presence extended far beyond Coruscant. Outposts appeared throughout the Outer Rim. Jedi Knights acted as diplomats, investigators, explorers, and protectors. Their role resembled that of guardians rather than soldiers. Many spent years traveling between worlds, solving local disputes that never reached galactic headlines. The galaxy was far from perfect, but the Jedi still viewed it as something that could be improved through patience and service. One of the most remarkable achievements of the era was Starlight Beacon. Positioned in the Outer Rim, the station functioned as a symbol of cooperation between the Republic and the Jedi Order, massive and luminous against the darkness of space. It served as a communications hub, rescue center, diplomatic station, and beacon of hope for frontier systems. Travelers arriving from distant sectors could see its lights long before reaching the station itself. The name was chosen carefully. It was meant to represent guidance. To many citizens, Starlight Beacon embodied everything admirable about the Republic at its peak. The Jedi who lived during this age reflected that optimism. Masters such as Avar Kriss became famous for their connection to the Force. Canon describes her perception of the Force almost as music, with individual beings contributing notes to a vast cosmic symphony. Elzar Mann approached the Force differently, possessing immense talent. alongside a willingness to question traditional assumptions. Vernestra Rwo achieved the rank of Jedi Knight at an unusually young age and became one of the era's most respected figures. These were not isolated heroes standing against catastrophe. They were members of a thriving institution confident in its future. Yet golden ages often hide dangers that become visible only in hindsight. Why did the Jedi's moment of greatest success coincide with the appearance of threats unlike any they had faced before? One answer lies with the Nihil. Unlike traditional governments or military powers, the Nihil operated as chaotic marauders. They emerged from the frontier regions and exploited secret hyperspace routes known as paths. Their attacks were unpredictable. Entire worlds could be isolated or assaulted without warning. The Republic struggled to respond because the Nihil ignored many assumptions upon which conventional security depended. Jedi accustomed to maintaining order suddenly confronted an enemy that weaponized disorder itself. It was not merely a military challenge. It was a challenge to how the Republic understood civilization. An even stranger threat emerged through creatures known as the Nameless. Their existence remains among the most unsettling developments in modern Star Wars canon. These beings possessed an unnatural connection to the Force. Jedi exposed to them experienced overwhelming fear. Some were reduced to lifeless husks. Others suffered terrifying visions. For an order built around communion with the Force, the Nameless represented something almost incomprehensible. They transformed a Jedi's greatest strength into vulnerability. Ancient records suggested that knowledge of these creatures had existed before, then vanished into obscurity. The High Republic, therefore, reveals an important truth about the Jedi. Their golden age was not defined by the absence of danger. It was defined by how they responded to danger. Knights and masters repeatedly risked their lives to protect worlds they had never visited before. Rescue missions often mattered as much as military victories. Compassion remained central to their identity. When disaster struck, Jedi were expected to arrive first and leave last. Their reputation throughout the Republic was built as much on service as on power. Still, beneath the confidence, subtle tensions already existed. The Order had become deeply integrated into the Republic. Most Jedi viewed that relationship as beneficial. Few questioned whether such closeness might eventually create problems. The Republic's institutions seemed stable. Corruption existed but had not yet reached the level seen during Palpatine's rise. Looking backward from the era of the Empire, however, it becomes difficult to ignore the pattern. The stronger the Republic and Jedi became together, the harder it would later be for one to survive without the other. Why did the Jedi choose a life so different from the people they protected? The answer begins with their daily existence. Across the High Republic and into the final centuries of the Republic, Jedi training followed a carefully structured path. Children identified as Force-sensitive entered the Order as younglings. Inside the temple on Coruscant, they learned meditation, history, ethics, and control of the Force. Training began early. The Jedi believed younger minds adapted more easily to discipline and emotional balance. By adulthood, many had spent nearly their entire lives inside the traditions of the Order. The process eventually led to one of the most important moments in any Jedi's life, the construction of a lightsaber. Unlike ordinary weapons, lightsabers were deeply personal. The Kyber crystal at the heart of each blade formed a connection with its user. During quests depicted in the Clone Wars, younglings traveled to worlds such as Ilum to locate crystals attuned to them through the Force. The experience was treated almost as a rite of passage. When a Jedi finally ignited a newly completed blade for the first time, the weapon symbolized far more than combat skill. It represented identity, responsibility, and belonging within a tradition stretching back thousands of years. As stars drifted beyond the windows of the Jedi Temple and generations of younglings practiced beneath its vaulted ceilings, the order appeared permanent. Ancient enemies had been defeated. The Republic flourished. New Jedi continued to arrive. Yet history rarely announces the moment when stability begins to weaken. The High Republic's brightest years would eventually fade, and the next age would introduce a child on a desert world whose life would transform the fate of the Jedi forever. Why did the Jedi become so fascinated by a prophecy they could never fully understand? The answer begins far from Coruscant, beneath the blazing twin suns of Tatooine. Around 41 BBY, a child named Anakin Skywalker was born to Shmi Skywalker in the settlement of Mos Espa. His birth immediately stood apart from every other story the Jedi knew. Shmi stated that there was no father. In The Phantom Menace, when Qui-Gon Jinn questions her, she simply explains that she carried him, gave birth to him, and raised him. The mystery is never solved within canon. Darth Sidious did not create Anakin. Popular theories and older interpretations have circulated for years, but current canon provides no definitive explanation beyond the extraordinary circumstances surrounding his birth. When Qui-Gon Jinn arrived on Tatooine in 32 BBY, he was not searching for the Chosen One. His mission involved protecting Queen Amidala of Naboo and escaping a crisis engineered by Darth Sidious. Yet during his stay on the desert world, Qui-Gon encountered something impossible to ignore. Anakin displayed remarkable reflexes, abilities that allowed him to participate in pod racing despite being a human child. More importantly, testing revealed an unprecedented connection to the Force. Qui-Gon measured a midi-chlorian count, higher than any previously recorded. Even Yoda's level appeared lower by comparison. For a Jedi devoted to listening to the will of the Force, such a discovery carried enormous significance. The prophecy itself had existed long before Anakin's birth. The Jedi believed a Chosen One would ultimately bring balance to the Force. What that balance meant remained unclear. Different Jedi interpreted the prophecy differently. Some viewed it as a prediction of victory over the Sith. Others approached it cautiously, recognizing how dangerous certainty could become. The texts survived, but their meaning remained elusive. Like many prophecies throughout history, they offered just enough clarity to inspire belief and just enough ambiguity to invite misunderstanding. When Qui-Gon brought Anakin before the Jedi Council on Coruscant, the response was far from unanimous enthusiasm. The council included some of the most respected Jedi in the galaxy: Yoda, Mace Windu, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Yaddle, and others. They sensed Anakin's power immediately, yet they also sensed fear. The boy worried about his mother. He feared loss. He feared separation. These emotions were entirely natural for a child, but the Jedi recognized that fear often opened pathways toward the dark side. Yoda's warning was simple and direct. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Why did the council hesitate when presented with the very child who might fulfill their most important prophecy? Part of the answer lies in the Jedi Code itself. For generations, the Order had taught emotional discipline. Attachment was viewed as dangerous because fear of losing someone could distort judgment. The Council looked at Anakin and saw an unusually powerful child carrying unusually powerful emotions. They were not rejecting him because they doubted his strength. They were worried precisely because of it. Great power amplified every choice. A small flaw in an ordinary person could become a catastrophe in someone capable of reshaping galactic history. Qui-Gon disagreed. Throughout The Phantom Menace, he consistently demonstrates a willingness to trust the Force, even when doing so places him at odds with the Council. He believed Anakin's discovery was not an accident. He believed the Force itself had guided events. His conviction never wavered. Even after the Council initially refused permission to train Anakin, Qui-Gon intended to proceed. He was prepared to leave Obi-Wan Kenobi behind if necessary. That determination reveals how strongly he believed the future of the Jedi might depend upon this one child from Tatooine. The duel on Naboo changed everything. Darth Maul's appearance confirmed the return of the Sith after roughly 1,000 years of hiding. During the Battle of Naboo, Qui-Gon confronted Maul alongside Obi-Wan Kenobi. The conflict ended with Qui-Gon's death and Maul's apparent defeat. As he lay dying, Qui-Gon made one final request. Obi-Wan must train Anakin. The promise bound Obi-Wan to a future he had never expected. It also ensured that Anakin would enter the Jedi Order despite the Council's reservations. For a time, the decision appeared successful. Anakin became Obi-Wan's Padawan learner. The Republic celebrated victory on Naboo. The Sith seemed defeated once again. Yet beneath the surface, darker developments were already underway. Senator Palpatine of Naboo had risen to the position of Supreme Chancellor. Most citizens saw him as a skilled politician navigating a crisis. Few suspected the Chancellor Palpatine and Darth Sidious were the same person. The Sith had not been defeated. They had simply moved closer to power than ever before. Why did the Jedi fail to recognize the danger growing at the center of the Republic itself? The answer is uncomfortable because it reveals how successful the Sith strategy had become. Unlike earlier dark side powers that openly challenged the Republic through conquest, Darth Sidious preferred manipulation. He did not seek immediate victory through military strength. He cultivated influence. He exploited bureaucracy. He encouraged division. Entire star systems drifted toward dissatisfaction with the Republic, while few understood who benefited most from that instability. The Jedi continued serving as peacekeepers, but many threats now emerge through political channels rather than battlefields. Meanwhile, the Republic itself was changing. Corruption spread through portions of the Senate. Corporate organizations such as the Trade Federation gained enormous influence. Wealthy interests often shaped legislation. Outer Rim systems increasingly felt neglected by the government centered on Coruscant. These frustrations eventually contributed to the separatist movement. Citizens who lost faith in the Republic became receptive to leaders promising alternatives. What made the situation particularly dangerous was that many of those grievances were genuine. Sidious did not invent every problem. he merely exploited them. One of the most important figures in this transformation was Count Dooku. Once a respected Jedi Master, Dooku eventually left the Order. His departure remains one of the clearest warnings that something within the Republic was deteriorating. Dooku believed the Senate had become hopelessly corrupt. He saw flaws others preferred to ignore. Yet his response led him toward the dark side rather than reform. Under the influence of Darth Sidious, Dooku became Darth Tyrannus, apprenticed to the Sith Lord orchestrating the galaxy's collapse. The tragedy is striking. Some of Dooku's criticisms were accurate. His solution was catastrophic. As tensions increased, the Jedi found themselves drawn ever deeper into politics. Their partnership with the Republic had lasted for centuries. Most masters viewed that relationship as both natural and beneficial. The Jedi protected the Republic because the Republic represented peace, law, and cooperation among worlds. Yet this closeness carried risks. The Order's identity became increasingly tied to the institutions it served. Criticism of the Republic often felt like criticism of the Jedi themselves. What had once been a strength slowly became a vulnerability. Why did so many warning signs fail to change the Jedi's course? Part of the answer lies in success. For generations, the system had worked. The Republic endured. The Jedi protected it. Most crises were resolved. The High Republic had reinforced confidence in that arrangement. When problems emerged, many leaders naturally assumed existing methods could solve them. Few organizations easily recognized the moment when old solutions stopped working. The Jedi were wise, disciplined, and dedicated, but they were not immune to institutional blind spots. Across these same years, Anakin Skywalker continued to grow. He trained under Obi-Wan. He developed extraordinary piloting abilities. His connection to the Force became increasingly powerful. Yet the concerns first identified by Yoda never disappeared. Anakin remained deeply attached to the people he loved. He remained afraid of losing them. Those emotions did not make him evil. In many ways, they reflected qualities ordinary people admired. But in a galaxy where a hidden Sith Lord was carefully studying every weakness, they would eventually become openings through which destiny itself could be manipulated. And while the Senate debated, while Jedi Masters discussed prophecies, and while Anakin moved toward adulthood, a secret army was being prepared far from public attention. Its soldiers were clones. Its purpose was hidden. Its creation was connected to forces operating in the shadows. When that army finally emerged on a dusty world called Geonosis, the Jedi Order would enter a war unlike anything it had faced in centuries. Why did an order devoted to peace suddenly find itself leading one of the largest armies in galactic history? The answer arrives in 22 BBY on the harsh world of Geonosis. Red dust swept across rocky plains while factories produced weapons for the Separatist Alliance. Jedi Knights had fought throughout their history, but they had never been designed to function as military commanders overseeing millions of troops. Yet that is exactly what happened when the Clone Wars began. The conflict emerged from years of political division between the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems, commonly called the Separatists. What almost nobody understood was that both sides were being manipulated by Darth Sidious, who controlled the Republic as Chancellor Palpatine and influenced the Separatists through Count Dooku. The First Battle of Geonosis transformed the Jedi Order overnight. More than 200 Jedi traveled to the planet in an attempt to rescue Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin Skywalker, and Padme Amidala. The mission rapidly became a disaster. Surrounded by battle droids inside the Petranaki arena, many Jedi were killed before reinforcements arrived. Then came a sight that altered galactic history. Hundreds of Republic gunships descended from the sky, carrying clone troopers from the newly revealed Grand Army of the Republic. The Clone Wars had begun. The Clone Army itself carried one of the greatest secrets ever concealed from the Jedi. Officially, the army had been commissioned years earlier for the Republic's protection. The genetic template came from bounty hunter Jango Fett. Millions of soldiers were bred, trained, and equipped on Kamino. To the Senate, the army appeared to be an extraordinary stroke of fortune, arriving precisely when needed. To the Jedi, it seemed suspicious but necessary. Only later would the horrifying truth become clear. The army had been designed from the beginning as part of Sidious's plan to destroy the Order. For the Jedi, the transition was immediate and profound. Masters became generals, Padawans became military officers, strategic briefings replaced diplomatic negotiations. Star destroyers crossed battlefronts. Clone troopers looked to Jedi commanders for leadership. In battle after battle, the Jedi demonstrated courage and skill. Yet the role itself represented a dramatic shift. An institution built to preserve peace now spent years directing military campaigns across the galaxy. Why did so few Jedi openly question this transformation? Part of the answer lies in the nature of the war itself. The Separatist threat was real. Entire systems seceded from the Republic. Massive droid armies invaded planets. Civilians died. Jedi who traveled to battle zones witnessed suffering firsthand. Refusing to act would have meant abandoning countless worlds. The Order therefore faced a dilemma with no simple solution. If they entered the war, they risked becoming soldiers. If they stayed out of it, they risked betraying the people they had sworn to protect. Throughout the conflict, certain Jedi became legendary figures. Obi-Wan Kenobi commanded troops across numerous campaigns. Anakin Skywalker developed a reputation as one of the Republic's most effective battlefield leaders. His tactics often ignored convention, frustrating superiors, while producing remarkable victories. Jedi such as Plo Koon, Kit Fisto, Luminara Unduli, Shaktai, and Isla Secura fought on dozens of fronts. Their names spread throughout the Republic. For ordinary citizens, the Jedi increasingly appeared not as monks or diplomats, but as military heroes. The war also transformed Anakin in ways that worried those closest to him. His abilities continued to grow at an extraordinary pace. Few Jedi could match his instincts in combat. Few pilots could rival his skill behind a starfighter's controls. Yet war rewarded traits the Jedi traditionally approached with caution. Aggression sometimes achieved results. Decisive action often saved lives. Anakin learned that emotional intensity could produce victory. The battlefield became a place where some of his greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses reinforced each other. Among the most important developments of the war was the arrival of Ahsoka Tano. Assigned as Anakin's Padawan by Yoda, she first appeared during the Battle of Christophsis. At the time, Anakin was not eager to become a teacher. Ahsoka was young, confident, and often stubborn. Their partnership began awkwardly. Yet over time they formed one of the strongest apprentice-master relationships in Jedi history. Together they fought across the galaxy, from the skies above Ryloth to the temples of Mortis and the battlefields of Mandalore. Why did Ahsoka become so important to understanding the Jedi Order's eventual fall? The answer begins with perspective. Unlike older masters deeply invested in the institution, Ahsoka occupied a unique position. She respected Jedi teachings, but had not spent centuries defending tradition. She admired the Order, yet could still recognize its flaws. Throughout the Clone Wars, she repeatedly encountered situations that challenged simplistic assumptions about duty, authority, and justice. Her experiences allowed viewers to see the Jedi not only as heroes, but also as an organization struggling under immense pressure. Meanwhile, Darth Sidious continued tightening his grip on events. Every major development strengthened his position. Republic victories justified emergency powers granted to Chancellor Palpatine. Separatist attacks increased public fear. Military dependence expanded. The Senate became increasingly willing to concentrate authority in a single leader. The brilliance of Sidious's plan lay in its invisibility. Citizens believed they were responding to crises. Few realized the same man was helping create those crises in the first place. The Jedi Council sensed that something was wrong. Masters such as Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan increasingly discussed the dark side clouding their vision. This concern appears repeatedly throughout the prequel era. The Force itself seemed harder to read. Premonitions became less reliable. Mysteries multiplied. The Jedi knew they were being manipulated, but they could not identify the source. Living directly beneath the nose of Darth Sidious on Coruscant, they searched for an enemy hidden in plain sight. Why did the Force appear to be warning the Jedi while revealing so little? One possibility lies in the nature of the dark side itself. Canon repeatedly depicts dark side power as capable of obscuring perception. Sidious was not merely a politician concealing secrets. He was among the most powerful Sith Lords in galactic history. His influence extended through political institutions, intelligence networks, military structures, and the Force itself. The Jedi were attempting to solve a puzzle while the architect of that puzzle continuously rearranged the pieces. Every clue led toward him. Every layer of deception concealed the next. Even amid war, however, life within the Jedi Order continued. Younglings still trained in the temple, the archives remained active. Padawans studied history, philosophy, and lightsaber forms. Ships arrived daily from distant systems carrying diplomats, refugees, and visitors. To many Jedi, these routines represented proof that the Order would endure. Wars came and went throughout history. The Jedi had survived them before. Most believed they would survive this one as well. Yet beneath that confidence, fractures were widening. The Republic was becoming more authoritarian. The war showed no sign of ending. Anakin's attachment to Padme Amidala remained secret but increasingly significant. Palpatine's influence over Anakin deepened with every passing year. And then a single event inside the Republic capital would expose weaknesses within the Jedi Order more clearly than any battle ever could. It would involve a bombing, a wrongful accusation, and a young former Padawan walking away from everything the Jedi had taught her. Why did the Jedi lose one of their best students at the exact moment they needed her most? The answer begins not on a battlefield, but inside the heart of the Jedi Temple itself. Near the end of the Clone Wars, an explosion struck the temple hangar on Coruscant. Several people died. The attack shocked the Order because it came from within a place considered one of the safest locations in the Republic. Investigations quickly followed. Fear spread through the temple, questions multiplied, and before long, suspicion focused on Ahsoka Tano. The accusation unfolded with alarming speed. Evidence appeared to connect Ahsoka to the bombing. Witness testimony pointed toward her involvement. Her attempts to clear her name often made her situation appear worse rather than better. Eventually, the Jedi Council made a decision that would have lasting consequences. Ahsoka was expelled from the Jedi Order and handed over to Republic authorities for trial. The choice reflected legal procedure. It also revealed how vulnerable the institution had become under wartime pressure. What makes the episode so significant is that Ahsoka was innocent. The true culprit was Barriss Offee, a Jedi Knight who had become disillusioned with the Order's role in the war. Barriss believed the Jedi had betrayed their principles. She saw generals where there should have been peacekeepers. She saw hypocrisy where there should have been wisdom. Her response was extreme and destructive, but her criticisms touched on concerns that many others quietly shared. When the truth finally emerged, Anakin uncovered the real perpetrator and Ahsoka's name was cleared. The Council apologized. Her place within the Order was restored. Yet Ahsoka refused to return. The moment remains one of the most important scenes in the history of the Jedi Order. Standing before masters who genuinely regretted what had happened, Ahsoka chose a different path. She explained that she needed to discover who she was outside the institution. The Council viewed the ordeal as a trial that had strengthened her. Ahsoka viewed it differently. The people she trusted most had doubted her when it mattered most. Their apology was sincere. It simply arrived too late. For Anakin Skywalker, the impact was profound. Ahsoka had become more than a student. She was family. Throughout the war, they had fought side by side, survived impossible situations, and developed a bond deeper than many Jedi relationships. Watching the Council abandon her reinforced doubts he had carried for years, the Jedi claimed to value compassion and loyalty. Yet when pressure mounted, institutional concerns seemed to outweigh personal trust. Anakin never forgot that lesson. Why did Ahsoka's departure expose weaknesses that the Council itself struggled to see? Part of the answer lies in perspective. Many senior Jedi genuinely believed they were acting responsibly. The Republic demanded accountability. Evidence appeared compelling. Procedures existed for a reason. From their viewpoint, they followed established principles. Yet institutions often judge themselves by intentions while others judge them by outcomes. Ahsoka experienced the consequences directly. The gap between what the Jedi believed they represented and how they actually behaved became impossible for her to ignore. The tragedy is that the Council's members were not villains. Yoda remained wise and compassionate. Obi-Wan remained honorable. Plo Koon cared deeply about Ahsoka's well-being. Mace Windu sought justice as he understood it. The problem was more subtle. Years of war had changed the environment around them. Decisions increasingly reflected political realities, military concerns, and institutional preservation, the Jedi still believed in their ideals. Living those ideals had become more complicated than ever. Meanwhile, another relationship continued developing beyond the Council's awareness. Throughout the Clone Wars, Anakin Skywalker maintained his secret marriage to Padme Amidala. The relationship violated Jedi rules regarding attachment. It also represented one of the most important emotional anchors in Anakin's life. They met in secret. They built a life hidden from public view. In quieter moments away from battlefields and Senate chambers, they imagined a future beyond war, yet secrecy carried costs. Every concealed truth created additional pressure. Why were attachments considered so dangerous by the Jedi? The answer is often misunderstood. The Jedi did not forbid compassion. In fact, compassion sat at the center of their philosophy. What concerned them was possessiveness. Fear of loss could become fear itself. Fear could become anger. Anger could become violence. The Order's history contained countless examples of Force users falling into darkness because they could not accept change, mortality, or separation. From the Jedi perspective, attachment risked transforming love into control. Yet Anakin increasingly viewed the rule itself as flawed. He loved deeply. He cared intensely. Those qualities felt human rather than dangerous. Palpatine recognized this conflict and nurtured it carefully. Throughout the Clone Wars, the Chancellor became one of Anakin's closest confidants. Their relationship extended back years. Palpatine offered praise when others offered caution. He emphasized Anakin's extraordinary abilities. He listened to frustrations the Jedi Masters often dismissed. To outsiders, the friendship seemed harmless. The Chancellor appeared to be mentoring a gifted young hero. In reality, Darth Sidious was conducting one of the most patient manipulations in galactic history. Unlike many Sith before him, Sidious understood that corruption worked best when it felt voluntary. He rarely ordered Anakin toward darkness. Instead, he encouraged doubts already present. He reinforced resentments. He highlighted perceived injustices. Each conversation moved Anakin slightly closer to a worldview in which the Jedi appeared restrictive while Palpatine appeared understanding. The process unfolded gradually enough that even Anakin failed to recognize what was happening. Why did the Jedi Council grow increasingly suspicious of Palpatine while remaining unable to stop him? The answer lies in the political structure Sidious had carefully built. By the later years of the war, Chancellor Palpatine possessed enormous authority. Emergency powers expanded his influence far beyond traditional limits. Many senators supported him. Citizens viewed him as the leader who had guided the Republic through crisis. Publicly challenging him without evidence carried serious risks. The Jedi sensed danger, but sensing danger and proving it were very different things. This tension reached a critical point when the Council assigned Anakin to spy on the Chancellor. The decision placed him in an impossible position. On one side stood the Order that had raised him. On the other stood a mentor he trusted. The request deepened his growing sense of alienation. Worse still, the Council denied him the rank of Master, despite granting him a seat among them. The moment became famous throughout Star Wars history. Anakin's frustration was immediate and visible. What he perceived as disrespect further widened the distance between himself and the institution he served. At the same time, frightening visions began haunting his sleep. Just as he had once foreseen his mother's suffering on Tatooine, Anakin now saw images of Padme dying. The visions felt vivid, unavoidable. Every attempt to dismiss them failed. Fear returned to the center of his life. Not fear for himself, but fear for someone he loved. And in the shadows of Coruscant, Darth Sidious finally recognized that the moment he had spent years preparing for was rapidly approaching. The Clone Wars were nearing their end. Separatist leaders were losing ground. Republic victories multiplied. Citizens dreamed of peace. Yet beneath the shining towers of Coruscant, the Jedi Order stood closer to destruction than at any point in its thousands of years of existence. The final trap had already been built. Its target was Anakin Skywalker. And soon, in an opera house illuminated by soft blue light, a Sith Lord would begin telling a story about a man who had learned to cheat death itself. Why did the Jedi lose? Not because they were weak, but because they were deceived by someone they trusted? The answer begins in the final days of the Clone Wars. Coruscant still glittered beneath endless streams of traffic. Republic warships continued arriving from distant fronts. The Senate remained active. To most citizens, victory seemed close. General Grievous had been driven into retreat. Separatist forces were weakening. The Republic appeared poised to emerge triumphant. Yet the reality was very different. The war had always been a mechanism rather than a goal, and the man who designed it was preparing to bring it to its intended conclusion. One evening, Chancellor Palpatine invited Anakin Skywalker to attend a performance at the Galaxy's Opera House. The setting was elegant and serene. Blue light reflected across the water-like structure surrounding the viewing platform. Music drifted through the chamber. There, away from battlefields and council chambers, Palpatine told Anakin the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise. According to the tale, Plagueis had become so powerful that he could influence life itself and prevent death. Whether every detail of the story was true remains uncertain. What mattered was the effect it produced. Palpatine had identified Anakin's greatest fear and presented the possibility of overcoming it. The conversation marked a turning point. For years, Sidious had built trust. Now he revealed the reward. If the Jedi could not save Padme, perhaps Sith knowledge could. The temptation was not power for its own sake, it was protection. That distinction is essential to understanding Anakin's tragedy. He did not wake one morning wishing to become evil. He became increasingly willing to compromise because he believed someone he loved was going to die. Every step toward darkness felt justified by a larger purpose. Why did Anakin report Palpatine to the Jedi and then help save him? Only hours later, because he was trapped between two loyalties that had become impossible to reconcile. When Palpatine finally revealed himself as Darth Sidious, Anakin initially chose the Jedi. He informed Mace Windu of the Chancellor's true identity. The revelation confirmed the Council's worst fears. The Sith Lord they had hunted throughout the war had been sitting at the center of government the entire time. Mace Windu immediately assembled a group of Jedi Masters, including Kit Fisto, Aegon Kohler, and Saesee Tiin, before confronting the Chancellor. What followed became one of the most decisive moments in galactic history. The confrontation ended quickly and violently. Sidious killed 3 Masters in seconds. Only Mace Windu remained. Drawing upon his formidable lightsaber skill, Windu gained the upper hand and forced Sidious into a vulnerable position. The Sith Lord appeared defeated, Lightning scarred his own face as he struggled against Windu's blade. Then Anakin arrived, everything balanced on a single decision. Windu believed Sidious was too dangerous to remain alive. Anakin believed Palpatine was the only person who might know how to save Padme. The choice lasted moments. Its consequences lasted generations. Anakin intervened. Mace Windu lost his hand and was hurled from the Chancellor's office into the endless depths of Coruscant. Sidious survived. The Republic died with him. Kneeling before the Sith Lord, Anakin accepted a new name, Darth Vader. The transformation was not complete in an emotional sense. He was frightened, conflicted, and desperate. Yet politically and spiritually, the line had been crossed. The Jedi had lost the Chosen One. The Sith had gained him. Why did the destruction of the Jedi happen so quickly after thousands of years of survival? The answer lies in a single command: Order 66. For years, clone troopers had fought alongside Jedi generals. They shared battlefields, hardships, victories, and losses. Captain Rex served under Anakin Skywalker. Commander Cody fought beside Obi-Wan Kenobi. Countless clone units developed respect for the Jedi they followed. Yet hidden within the clones existed inhibitor chips designed for a specific purpose. When Palpatine issued Order 66, those chips activated. Loyalty shifted instantly. Jedi became enemies of the Republic they had spent centuries protecting. Across the galaxy, betrayal unfolded almost simultaneously. On Utapau, Commander Cody received the order moments after speaking with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Artillery fire erupted against the Jedi Master. On Felucia, Aayla Secura was shot down by troops she trusted. On Kashyyyk, clone forces turned against Yoda. On Saliukami, Stas Ali was killed while riding through battle. On Maigito, Ki-Adi-Mundi died leading an assault against separatist positions. The scenes repeated endlessly. Some Jedi sensed danger a fraction of a second before it arrived. Many never had the chance. The scale of the disaster is difficult to comprehend. For thousands of years, the Jedi Order had survived wars, schisms, and political upheavals. Then, within hours, most of its leadership disappeared. Communication networks collapsed. Survivors became isolated. The enemy was everywhere because the enemy had been standing beside them all along. Sidious had turned trust itself into a weapon. Why did the Jedi Temple fall with such shocking speed? Because Darth Vader led the attack. After accepting his new identity, Vader accompanied the 501st Legion to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The building that had trained generations of Jedi became a battlefield. Temple guards fought desperately. Masters attempted to organize resistance. Younglings hid within corridors once filled with learning and meditation. The assault was systematic. Room by room, the center of Jedi civilization was destroyed. The same halls that had witnessed centuries of instruction now echoed with blaster fire and lightsaber clashes. Among the most haunting moments in Star Wars history occurs when younglings approach Anakin for help. They still see him as a hero. They still trust him. The tragedy rests in that trust. The Jedi had raised him. The temple had been his home. Yet fear, manipulation, and desperation had transformed him into the instrument of its destruction. The fall of Anakin Skywalker and the fall of the Jedi Order became inseparable events. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda survived. Their survival was not due to luck alone, Both sensed disturbances in the Force and reacted quickly. Escaping assassination attempts, they eventually regrouped and learned the horrifying truth. The Republic had become the Galactic Empire. Palpatine declared the Jedi traitors. Citizens frightened by years of war largely accepted the transition. The Sith had accomplished something no previous Sith generation had achieved. They conquered the Republic from within. Why did so many ordinary people accept the destruction of the Jedi? Part of the answer lies in perception. Most citizens never saw the Jedi as they truly were. There were only around 10,000 Jedi serving a galaxy containing trillions of beings. Many people never met one. Their understanding came through news reports, rumors, political speeches, and wartime propaganda. When Palpatine accused the Jedi of attempting a coup, citizens lacked the information necessary to challenge the narrative. Fear of instability made authoritarian promises attractive. The Empire presented itself as a solution rather than a threat. Yet the Jedi were not completely gone. Across distant systems, scattered survivors remained alive. Some escaped because they were far from clone units when Order 66 was issued. Others survived through skill, instinct, or extraordinary circumstances. The galaxy had changed forever, but the story was not over. A new age was beginning, an age of imperial rule, hidden resistance, hunted survivors, and a relentless campaign designed to erase every trace of the Jedi Order from history itself. Why did Emperor Palpatine continue hunting the Jedi after he had already destroyed their order? At first glance, the answer seems obvious. The Jedi were enemies of the Empire, yet by 19 BBY, the institution itself had effectively ceased to exist. The temple had fallen, the High Council was gone, most masters were dead. The Republic had become the Galactic Empire. Palpatine controlled the Senate, the military, and vast intelligence networks. By any conventional measure, he had won. And yet the hunt continued with relentless intensity. The reason lies in what the Jedi represented. Even shattered, they remained symbols. A single surviving Jedi could expose Imperial lies. A former knight could inspire resistance on an occupied world. More importantly, Palpatine understood something many tyrants throughout history have understood. Victory is never complete until alternatives disappear. As long as the Jedi survived, another vision of the galaxy survived with them. The Empire therefore sought not merely to defeat the Jedi, but to erase them from memory. One of the primary tools of this campaign was the Inquisitorius. Under Imperial rule, former Jedi temples, prisons, and military facilities were repurposed to serve the new regime. Among the most infamous locations was Fortress Inquisitorius on the ocean moon of Nur. Rising from dark waters beneath perpetual storms, the fortress became a center for tracking Force-sensitive survivors. Here, former Jedi and other Force users who had fallen to the dark side were trained as Imperial Inquisitors. Their mission was simple: locate surviving Jedi and eliminate them. The Inquisitors occupy a fascinating place in Jedi history because many had once belonged to the Order itself. Some were former Padawans. Others had served as Jedi during the Clone Wars. After Order 66, fear, anger, or despair drew them toward the Empire. The Grand Inquisitor, seen prominently in Rebels and Obi-Wan Kenobi, had once served as a temple guard. The transformation reflected one of the oldest patterns in Jedi history. The dark side rarely arrived as a sudden change. More often, it exploited wounds that already existed. Why did some Jedi survive while thousands of others fell? The answer varies from one survivor to another. Obi-Wan Kenobi escaped because of his experience, instincts, and connection to the Force. Yoda survived through centuries of wisdom and mastery. Others endured because they happened to be in remote locations when Order 66 occurred. Still, others survived only briefly before eventually being discovered. Each story carried its own tragedy. Survival often meant abandoning everything familiar. Lightsabers were hidden, names were changed. Former Jedi learned to live quietly in a galaxy that viewed them as criminals. Obi-Wan's story illustrates this reality perfectly. After the rise of the Empire, he settled on Tatooine under the name Ben Kenobi. The harsh desert world that had once produced Anakin Skywalker now became the hiding place of his former master. For years, Obi-Wan lived in isolation, while secretly watching over young Luke Skywalker. His days grew smaller. Instead of commanding armies, he worked among moisture farmers and scavengers. Yet beneath that ordinary existence remained one of the greatest Jedi Masters in galactic history. Yoda chose a different exile. He retreated to Dagobah, a remote swamp world strong in the Force. The environment itself helped conceal him from Imperial detection. Dense vegetation covered the landscape. Mist drifted through ancient trees. Strange creatures moved through dark waters. More importantly, the Force flowed powerfully through the planet. Dagobah became both sanctuary and waiting room. There, Yoda prepared for a future he hoped would eventually arrive. Why did the Jedi not simply rebuild immediately after Order 66? The answer begins with scale. The destruction had been too complete. Thousands of Jedi were dead, training systems were gone, archives had been seized or destroyed, communication networks collapsed. The Empire controlled hyperspace routes, military forces, and planetary governments. Any attempt to openly rebuild the Order would have attracted immediate attention. Survival required secrecy. Rebuilding required time. The few remaining Jedi understood this reality even when they hated it. One survivor who chose a very different path was Ahsoka Tano. Having left the Jedi Order before its fall, she technically survived Order 66 as neither Jedi nor civilian. Her experiences during the rise of the Empire shaped much of modern Star Wars canon. Under the codename Fulcrum, Ahsoka supported resistance movements across the galaxy. She assisted rebels without attempting to restore the old order exactly as it had existed before. In many ways, her journey represented an alternative vision of what service to the light side could become after the Republic's collapse. The years passed. Imperial Star Destroyers patrolled major systems. Stormtroopers replaced clone troopers. Monuments celebrating the Empire rose on countless worlds. Young generations grew up knowing almost nothing about the Jedi. By the time of Rebels, set roughly 5 years before A New Hope, many citizens viewed them as legends rather than historical figures. Children heard stories about lightsabers and the Force the same way others might hear myths about ancient heroes. Palpatine's campaign to erase memory had achieved remarkable success. Why did the Force continue producing new heroes even after the Empire destroyed the old Guardians? The answer emerges through characters such as Ezra Bridger. Living on the occupied world of Lothal, Ezra initially survived as a street thief. He knew little about the Jedi and even less about their history. Yet the Force remained active. It had not disappeared with the fall of the Temple. When Ezra encountered Kanan Jarrus, a survivor of Order 66, a new apprentice-master relationship began. The details differed from traditional Jedi training. Circumstances demanded flexibility. Still, the core principles endured. Kanan himself embodied another important truth. He was not a legendary master like Yoda. He was not a council member. During the Clone Wars, he had been a Padawan named Caleb Doom. Order 66 interrupted his training before it was complete. Yet during the Imperial era, Kanan matured into exactly the kind of Jedi the galaxy needed. His story demonstrates that the survival of the Order depended not only on famous figures, but also on ordinary survivors who refused to surrender their ideals. Throughout these years, Darth Vader continued serving as the Empire's most feared enforcer. His existence became one of the cruelest ironies in Jedi history. The Chosen One who had once trained within the temple now hunted those who remained. Survivors who encountered him often described an overwhelming presence in the Force. He moved through battlefields like a living nightmare. To many Jedi, Vader seemed less like a fallen knight and more like the physical embodiment of the Order's greatest failure. Yet even Vader could not extinguish hope completely. Across the galaxy, small acts of resistance accumulated. Rebels shared information. Survivors protected Force-sensitive children. Ancient knowledge remained hidden in forgotten temples and abandoned outposts. The Empire appeared invincible, but history rarely moves in straight lines. While Palpatine focused on securing his rule, two children of Anakin Skywalker were growing up in secret. One lived beneath the deserts of Tatooine. The other was raised within the royal family of Alderaan. Neither yet understood the role they would play, but together they represented the first real possibility that the Jedi Order's story might not end with the Empire after all. Why did the Jedi Order ultimately return through the son of the man who destroyed it? The answer begins on a desert world that the Jedi Council would never have considered important. Tatooine sat far from the Republic's political center. Criminal syndicates operated openly there. Moisture farmers struggled beneath twin suns. Yet it was on this remote planet that Luke Skywalker spent his youth, unaware that the future of the Jedi rested upon his choices. While the Empire expanded across the galaxy, Luke dreamed of distant stars. He knew nothing of the Clone Wars. He knew nothing of Anakin Skywalker. The history of the Jedi existed only as scattered rumors and forgotten stories. Everything changed in 0BBY when a small astromech droid carrying a message from Princess Leia Organa arrived at the Lars homestead. The chain of events that followed has become one of the defining stories of galactic history. Luke met Obi-Wan Kenobi. He learned that his father had once been a Jedi Knight. He received Anakin's lightsaber. For the first time, the ancient order reached forward from the past and touched the future. The Jedi legacy, nearly erased by the Empire, found a new student. Why did Obi-Wan choose Luke rather than attempting to rebuild the Order directly himself? The answer lies in age, circumstance, and hope. By this point, Obi-Wan had spent nearly 2 decades in exile. He understood that his role was no longer to restore the Jedi personally. Instead, he needed to guide someone capable of carrying the tradition forward. Luke represented possibility. Unlike survivors burdened by the failures of the Republic era, Luke approached the Force without decades of institutional assumptions. He inherited the wisdom of the Jedi without inheriting every habit that had contributed to their downfall. The destruction of the Death Star at the Battle of Yavin marked more than a military victory. It signaled the return of the Jedi to galactic affairs. Luke's successful attack on the battle station relied not only on piloting skill but on trust in the Force. Guided by Obi-Wan's voice after his death, Luke switched off his targeting computer and relied upon instinct. The moment echoed ancient Jedi teachings. Knowledge mattered. Training mattered. Yet the Force remained something that could not be reduced entirely to calculation and machinery. 3 years later, Luke traveled to Dagobah and encountered Yoda. The meeting carried enormous historical weight. The diminutive figure living among swamps and twisted roots was not merely a wise hermit. He was the last Grand Master of the Jedi Order. Through Yoda, Luke gained access to traditions stretching back centuries. Training on Dagobah differed sharply from military instruction. There were no battle plans, no Senate debates, no armies. Instead, there were lessons about patience, fear, and self-knowledge. Why did Yoda seem so concerned about Luke's emotions when the galaxy desperately needed heroes? Because the fall of Anakin remained fresh in his memory. Yoda had witnessed firsthand how fear could transform even the most gifted Jedi. Luke's impatience reminded him of Anakin, so did his attachment to friends. Yet Luke was not Anakin. That distinction would eventually prove crucial. When Luke abandoned his training to help Han Solo and Leia on Cloud City, Yoda and Obi-Wan worried history might repeat itself. Their fears were understandable. They had watched one Skywalker fall. The possibility of losing another was terrifying. Cloud City changed Luke forever. During his duel with Darth Vader, he learned the truth about his father. The revelation shattered assumptions he had carried since meeting Obi-Wan. Vader was not merely the murderer of Anakin Skywalker, he was Anakin Skywalker. The enemy responsible for hunting Jedi across the galaxy was Luke's father. The discovery complicated everything. What had appeared to be a simple struggle between good and evil suddenly became intensely personal. Why did Luke succeed where so many Jedi before him had failed? One answer lies in how he interpreted Jedi teachings. The Old Order often viewed attachment as dangerous. Luke certainly experienced attachment. He cared deeply about his friends and family. Yet rather than allowing that love to become possessiveness, he eventually transformed it into compassion. This distinction becomes most visible during the final confrontation aboard the second Death Star in 4ABY. Emperor Palpatine expected Luke to kill Vader in anger and claim his place as a Sith. For a brief moment, the trap nearly succeeded. Luke unleashed a furious assault and defeated Vader. Then he stopped, looking at his father's severed mechanical hand and then at his own gloved hand. Luke recognized the path before him. He understood what Palpatine wanted. More importantly, he understood what he himself wanted. Casting aside his lightsaber, Luke declared that he was a Jedi like his father before him. It remains one of the most important statements in Star Wars history because it redefined victory. Luke did not win by destroying his enemy. He won by refusing to become him. Why did Darth Vader return to the light after decades of darkness? The answer begins with the person standing before him. For years, Vader had believed Anakin Skywalker was effectively dead. Palpatine encouraged that belief. The Empire depended upon it, yet Luke refused to accept it. Again and again he insisted there was still good within his father. No Jedi Council meeting voted on this judgment. No ancient text instructed him to make it. Luke simply believed redemption remained possible. In the end, he was right. When Palpatine unleashed Force lightning against Luke, Vader faced a choice resembling the one Anakin had faced decades earlier in the Chancellor's office. This time the outcome was different. Rather than sacrificing someone he loved to save himself, Vader sacrificed himself to save someone he loved. He seized the Emperor and hurled him into the Death Star's reactor shaft. The act fulfilled the Chosen One prophecy in a way few had expected. Darth Sidious died. The Sith Order collapsed. Anakin Skywalker returned. The Battle of Endor ended Imperial dominance, but it did not instantly restore the Jedi Order. The Temple on Coruscant remained gone. The archives remained scattered. Thousands of years of institutional continuity had been broken. Luke therefore faced a challenge unlike any encountered by previous Jedi. He was not joining an established order. He was attempting to rebuild one. The task required him to become historian, teacher, explorer, and founder all at once. Why is the period after Endor one of the least understood yet most important eras in Jedi history? Because Luke spent years searching for knowledge lost during the Imperial Age. Canon sources reveal him visiting ancient Jedi sites, studying surviving records, and gathering fragments of tradition from across the galaxy. Unlike the old Jedi Council, Luke had no vast bureaucracy supporting him. Every discovery required personal effort. Ancient temples hidden on forgotten worlds suddenly became priceless resources. Relics ignored by the Empire became foundations for the future. Eventually, Luke began training a new generation of students. Among them was Ben Solo, the son of Leia Organa and Han Solo. Strong in the Force and descended from the Skywalker bloodline, Ben appeared destined for greatness. Luke invested years in his nephew's education. The future seemed promising. After all the suffering endured by the Jedi, a new beginning finally appeared within reach. Yet history has a habit of repeating its deepest wounds in unexpected forms. The old order had fallen partly because it failed to recognize darkness growing close to home. Luke's new order would soon face a disturbingly similar challenge. Hidden influences were already reaching toward Ben Solo. Ancient fears were awakening once again, and before long the dream of rebuilding the Jedi would suffer another devastating collapse. Why does the history of the Jedi seem to repeat itself even after the fall of the Sith and the victory at Endor? The answer begins with Ben Solo. Born after the Galactic Civil War, Ben inherited a remarkable legacy. He was the son of Leia Organa, the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, and the nephew of Luke Skywalker. Few individuals in galactic history carried such a connection to the Force. Luke recognized his potential early and eventually brought him into his new Jedi Academy. For a time, the future appeared bright. Students trained. Ancient knowledge was preserved. The Jedi seemed poised to return as a meaningful presence in the galaxy. Yet another influence was already at work. Unknown to most of the galaxy, Supreme Leader Snoke had begun manipulating Ben from afar. Later revelations would show that Snoke himself was part of a larger design created by Darth Sidious, who had survived on the hidden Sith world of Exegol. The strategy echoed earlier Sith methods: isolation, doubt, fear, emotional pressure. The same vulnerabilities that Sidious had once exploited in Anakin became tools against Ben. History was not repeating itself exactly, but familiar patterns had returned. The decisive moment came during a night that Luke Skywalker would later remember with profound regret. Sensing immense darkness within Ben, Luke briefly ignited his lightsaber while standing over his sleeping nephew. The impulse lasted only a moment. Luke immediately recognized it as a mistake. Yet Ben awoke and witnessed only the blade above him. From his perspective, the person he trusted most appeared ready to kill him. In seconds, years of manipulation achieved their goal. Trust shattered. Ben Solo became Kylo Ren. Why did Luke Skywalker, who redeemed Darth Vader, fail with Ben Solo? The question haunted him for years. Luke understood more clearly than anyone how dangerous fear could become. Yet even he was not immune to it. For an instant, he saw the possibility of another galactic catastrophe. He saw worlds burning. He saw darkness spreading. The reaction was brief, but history often turns on moments measured in seconds. Luke's failure did not come from cruelty. It came from fear, the same emotion that had repeatedly shaped Jedi history from the time of Anakin onward. The destruction that followed devastated Luke's academy. Several students died. Others followed Kylo Ren. The temple itself was destroyed. Details remain partially obscured within canon, but the outcome is clear. Luke's attempt to rebuild the Jedi Order collapsed. Once again, a generation of Jedi vanished before it could fully mature. The echoes of Order 66 were impossible to ignore. Different circumstances, different people, yet another dream reduced to ruins. Luke responded by withdrawing from the galaxy entirely. He traveled to Ahch-To, the world associated with the earliest known Jedi traditions. There, among ancient stone structures overlooking endless oceans, he entered exile. The choice remains controversial both within the galaxy and among audiences. Some view it as abandonment. Others see it as despair born from responsibility. What matters for the history of the Jedi is that Luke came to believe the Order itself might be part of the problem. Why did Luke conclude that the Jedi should end? His reasoning reflected years of reflection on history. Looking backward, Luke saw repeated cycles of failure. The Jedi had become entangled with politics. They had failed to stop Palpatine. They had lost Anakin. His own academy had fallen. The evidence seemed overwhelming. Perhaps, Luke suggested, the galaxy would be better without Jedi at all. It was not the argument of a villain. It was the argument of a man crushed by disappointment and convinced that every attempt at rebuilding only created new suffering. Yet Ahch-To contained another lesson hidden within its ancient stones. The first Jedi temple stood there because the earliest generations had sought understanding rather than certainty. Ancient texts survived on the island. The prime Jedi mosaic still depicted balance. Long before councils, wars, and bureaucracies, there had simply been seekers trying to understand the Force. The location itself quietly challenged Luke's conclusion. The failures of institutions did not necessarily invalidate the ideals that inspired them. Why did Rey succeed in reaching Luke when so many others could not? Because she arrived carrying questions rather than answers. Rey did not possess a detailed understanding of Jedi history. She had not lived through the Republic. She had not participated in old debates about doctrine and tradition. What she carried instead was hope. During her time on Ahch-To, She encountered both Luke's wisdom and his disappointment. She learned from his experiences while refusing to accept his despair. In many ways, their relationship mirrored the dynamic between older and younger generations throughout Jedi history. Experience offered caution. Youth offered possibility. Meanwhile, the conflict between Rey and Kylo Ren grew increasingly important. Both were connected through unusual Force bonds orchestrated by Snoke. Both struggled with questions of identity. Yet their paths diverged in critical ways. Kylo sought meaning through destruction of the past. Rey searched for meaning through understanding it. The distinction reflects one of the central themes running throughout Jedi history. The past can become a prison, but it can also become a teacher. The story reached its climax on Exegol in 35 ABY, Daichu. Hidden within dangerous regions of space, Exegol served as the center of the Sith Eternal. Massive fleets emerged from its storms. Ancient Sith cultists operated in secrecy. Most importantly, Darth Sidious revealed that he had survived the events of Return of the Jedi. The details involve cloning technology, dark side experimentation, and preparations extending across decades. What matters for the Jedi story is that the ancient conflict between Jedi and Sith had once again reached a decisive confrontation. Why does Rey's victory matter beyond the defeat of Palpatine? Because it suggests a future not limited by the mistakes of the past. During the confrontation on Exegol, Rey drew strength not only from her own abilities, but from the legacy of Jedi who came before her. Voices including Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Anakin Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Qui-Gon Jinn, Kanan Jarrus, and others encouraged her through the Force. The moment symbolically connected thousands of years of history. The Jedi Order was not merely a building on Coruscant. It was not merely a council chamber or a set of regulations. It was a tradition carried through generations of individuals who chose service over domination. After the battle, Rey traveled to Tatooine. There, near the Lars homestead, where Luke once gazed toward the horizon, she buried the lightsabers of Luke and Leia. Twin suns hung low above the desert. Wind moved across familiar sands. Asked for her name, Rey chose Skywalker. The choice did not erase her own origins. Instead, it acknowledged the people whose example had shaped her path. The future of the Jedi remained unwritten, but it remained alive. And so the history of the Jedi Order stretches from forgotten centuries before the Republic to uncertain years beyond the fall of the Final Order. It includes triumphs and failures, wisdom and blindness, compassion and tragedy. The Order survived ancient schisms, galaxy-spanning wars, and near extinction. It produced figures as different as Yoda, Ahsoka Tano, Luke Skywalker, and Rey. Across thousands of years, one lesson appears again and again. The Jedi were never defined by perfection. They were defined by the continual effort to choose the light despite imperfection. Far away from the deserts of Tatooine, beyond the battlefields of Geonosis and Endor, beyond the ruins of temples and the rise and fall of governments, another night settles over Coruscant. Inside the vast halls of the ancient Jedi archives, lamps dim one by one. Endless shelves disappear into darkness. Dust drifts through quiet air. The voices of countless generations seem almost audible in the silence. And somewhere among those memories, beneath stone worn smooth by thousands of years, the long story of the Jedi rests once more, waiting for another listener to walk those halls and hear it again. When you look across the entire history of the Jedi Order, one pattern appears again and again. The greatest threats rarely arrive as fleets of warships emerging from hyperspace or armies marching across battlefields. They begin much smaller. They begin with fear. The fear of losing someone you love, the fear of losing control, the fear of an uncertain future. The Sith learned to feed that fear until it consumed entire civilizations, while the Jedi spent thousands of years trying to master it without denying the emotions that gave it life. In many ways, the long struggle between Jedi and Sith is not a conflict between different powers, but between different responses to the same human experience. That is why the story of the Jedi never truly belongs to institutions, councils, or temples. The temple on Coruscant fell. Starlight Beacon was destroyed. Luke's academy collapsed. Even the Republic itself disappeared. Yet the deeper tradition endured because it was carried by individuals making choices. Qui-Gon chose faith in the Force. Obi-Wan chose duty despite heartbreak. Ahsoka chose integrity when trust was broken. Luke chose mercy when vengeance seemed justified. Again and again, the Jedi survived not because their structures were indestructible, but because someone, somewhere, chose compassion over fear. The irony at the heart of Jedi history is that many of their failures emerged from their greatest strengths. Their devotion to peace drew them into protecting the Republic. Their confidence in centuries of wisdom made it difficult to recognize new dangers. Their commitment to emotional discipline sometimes left them struggling to understand emotional pain. Yet these flaws do not diminish the Order's achievements. They make those achievements more meaningful. The Jedi were never flawless guardians, standing above ordinary beings. They were people attempting to live according to ideals that were often far more difficult than they first appeared. Perhaps that is why Anakin Skywalker's story sits so close to the center of everything. He represents both the Order's greatest failure and its ultimate redemption. The child discovered on Tatooine helped destroy the Jedi, then fulfilled the prophecy by destroying the Sith. His life refuses to fit into simple categories. Through Anakin, the saga suggests that destiny and choice are not opposites. The Force may create opportunities, present visions, and shape encounters, but individuals still decide what to do with those gifts. Fate opens doors. Character determines which one is chosen. And then there is hope, the quiet thread connecting every era. Hope carried the earliest Jedi through forgotten centuries. Hope survived beneath Imperial rule when the Order seemed extinct. Hope remained alive in Luke Skywalker when everyone else saw only Darth Vader. Hope reached Ben Solo when redemption appeared impossible. The galaxy changes constantly. Governments rise and fall. Heroes become legends. Entire generations pass into memory. Yet hope persists because it does not depend on certainty. It survives precisely when certainty has vanished. So as the long history of the Jedi finally settles into silence, you begin to understand why the story feels less like a straight line and more like a great turning wheel. Light gives way to darkness. Darkness gives way to light. Each generation inherits the victories and mistakes of those who came before. The Force continues flowing through all living things, patient and enduring, while individuals struggle, learn, fail, and begin again. And somewhere far away on a windswept island, above a restless sea, an ancient mosaic still waits in the fading light, its stone figure seated between darkness and illumination as waves break softly against the cliffs below.